Welcome to our February 18, 2025 City Council School Board Joint Work Session. And I'm so glad we could come together this afternoon and discuss the going forward of Lynchburg City Schools. We have opening prayer by Vice Mayor Demer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let's pray. Dear Lord, we thank you for this chance to get together. We thank you for our city. We thank you for our schools. We thank you for all the people that make our schools successful. We pray that you would guide us and give us wisdom in our decision making and in our oversight over these important things. But Lord, let us never forget the focus of this is the children, and let us never lose sight of that. I pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
This evening we come together to discuss the Lynchburg 26 budget and capital improvement plan. And right now I turn the discussion over to Dr. Gupta.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I give this opportunity to welcome all City Council members and my fellow school board members. And I'll hand over the baton to Dr. Copeland, our capable superintendent or
City manager.
City manager.
Dr. Gupta, that's just fine. If anything, I'm just going to offer a greeting and acknowledge delaying or having weather kind of interrupt things for us. It's a very cool circumstance that we are in a building that is co-located with city IT and schools IT. So what a perfect place for us to meet in a building that's meant for both pieces. So if anything, I wanted to acknowledge that. So turn it back to you.
Dr. Gupta.
Hand over to Dr. Copeland.
Good afternoon, everybody. I want to take a few brief moments this afternoon and cover a few what I consider to be key facts, background, and history. But where I want to start first was I need folks, to, at least if you don't know me, to understand a little bit about me and how I got here. I moved to Lynchburg in 2012 to be the Assistant Superintendent of Operations. In 2009, I retired from the Marine Corps and entered education as a second career. I worked at a very small school division in Houston, Texas that had 69,000 students and 74 campuses. And I walked into a $450 million new building and renovation bond campaign. So I was a very, very busy place. Really too busy, and a few years later, I had an opportunity to start looking to relocate back to the Southeast. I grew up in South Carolina, get close to family in North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, but more importantly, I was looking for an environment that was more supportive of my children. My children were in middle school and going into high school, and things are bigger in Texas. My son's high school would have had 3,000 students in it. His middle school had 1,800. And my daughter's elementary school had 1,200 students with 12 trailers out behind it. It was a huge operation. My children needed a smaller environment, and we wanted a place that we could call home. And we found that in Lynchburg. In May of 2020, I left Lynchburg as the deputy superintendent and went off to be the vice president at a community college for a couple of years. And then I did a couple of years as the chief financial officer at Virginia Episcopal School here in town. When I left VES, I started my own business, and that's where I was when the board called and asked me to come back to be the interim superintendent. Why is all this important? If you think about a person living in a place from 2012 until 2025, when I look back over my life, and I'm 58 years old, Lynchburg's the longest I've lived in any one place. You know, the nature of a military career is you move every 2 to 3 years. My parents were both employed by the state. My mother was a high school math teacher. So we moved a couple of times. And when I got to looking at it, when I was preparing these comments, living in Lynchburg is our home. It's important. It's where my kids graduated high school. You know, it's where we tell people to come visit us. We love this city. And a thriving, successful public school system is the cornerstone and critical to economic development for this city. So I went back and I looked through all of the back and forth and the different memos and information requests from last year. And where I wanted to start was I want to try to provide some clarity relative to enrollment. There seems to be a lot of back and forth over the years over enrollment. There are numerous approaches to enrollment, and depending on who's looking at it, when they're looking at it, and the rubrics that they're asking you to submit the numbers according to, you get varying numbers. True enrollment for LCS is every child that would be expected to walk through a school door if everybody came to school on the same day, okay? For Lynchburg, on January 31st, the kindergarten through 12th grade number of students was 7,303. Pre-K through 12th grade, which is another number you hear sometimes, was 7,668. Now, in the communications that moved around last year between schools and city council, there's references to the October census date. Okay, that October census date will be different than the date I just gave you. There will be a census day in March. That date will be different. That number will be different than all those other dates because students are coming and going on a regular basis. Okay, so when you request, you'll hear reference to ADM, average daily attendance. You'll have reference to ADM, average daily membership. You'll hear enrollment. You'll hear K through 12. You'll hear pre-K through 12. And there's even a few students we have that we call PG, postgraduate. Those are children that have graduated, finished up their 12th grade year, but they, according to the state, they still rate additional services. All of that's in the mix of how you look at enrollment. So it's all dependent on when and how you look at it. I've provided you a one-page summary straight from the Virginia Department of Education's calculation tool. The reason I did that is I think it's important that you understand that, and if I have extra copies, if somebody needed one, raising hands. Thanks, sir. Okay. So why average daily membership that's on the Department of Education's calculation tool is an important number is that that's what funding is tied to, okay? How they derive that number is a very complicated approach, but I have provided that to you also, which is the printout from Weldon Cooper, who by the Code of Virginia does that calculation for the Department of Education, and it explains it in mathematical, statistical detail that any math professors in here would greatly appreciate, but it's there should you choose to take a look at it. Okay, for this year, the Department of Education ADM number that is in the calc tool is 7,120.6. Remember that our student count, K through 12, and that ADM number is a K through 12 number, so 7120.6 is the number they're using in a formula to generate revenue and payments to the school division. 7,303 is our K through 12 enrollment as of January 31st. The number that Weldon Cooper provides as ADM, which is the 7,120, is a number that from the big budget in the sky, when you're talking about the billions and billions of dollars that this state has appropriated towards education, that number from a budgeting perspective and a financial analyst perspective gets moved for all school divisions around this Commonwealth such that the ADM number fits into the money that's appropriated or expected to be appropriated for that. So I have seen years where the 7120 or that you see as of the December calc tool, when we get to March or we get to the April update, that number will be tweaked a little bit because they need to make the ADM number fit into the overall state budget.
Okay, so it isn't an estimation to fit into a budget, but it is how we are funded. So that's the critical piece of that. The other piece of the Department of Education's funding formula is this thing they refer to as local composite index. Local composite index changes every 2 years. Right now we're on what's called the 2024 to 26 local composite index. Our local composite index is right now 0.3872. The lower the number, the better. Okay, and I say it that way because a 0.35 versus a 0.38 means we get more money that comes out of the funding formula based off of the number of students we have. LCI itself looks at many different variables, primarily 3, but there's a 4th one worth mentioning. It looks at property values in your locality. It looks at the adjusted gross income numbers for the people in your locality. It looks at your taxable retail sales, and it looks at your population. Like most things done at that level of a commonwealth or a bureaucracy, those are trailing numbers. An example of that is that the 2021 population estimate was one of those inputs to the 2024 to 26 local composite index. I think the population might be a little different in 2021 than it is in 2024 or 2025, as are property values, taxable retail sales, adjustable gross income. All of those things are variables into a formula to produce how much money the schools across the state get. It's not perfect. Some people will say it's flawed. It's been around for a very long time. It was going to be very challenging to change it. It is what we have right now. As I mentioned previously, I worked for Lynchburg City Schools from 2012 to 2020. One of my major responsibilities during that time frame was capital improvement. There was a large project that was on the table when I got here. It's Heritage High School. Heritage High School project started in 2012. We opened it in 2015. And I think we finished paying the bills sometime in 2016 or 2017. When we came out of that project, there was a little bit of money left over. And there was a capital improvement plan that was put together in the 16, 17, and 18 timeframes, looking at a couple of key areas for the city of Lynchburg. First and foremost, the demographic projections for enrollment in Lynchburg City Schools showed a declining enrollment over time. Declining enrollment tied directly to a declining birth rate that I think many of you might have heard talked about in the public sectors, but additionally, a growing number of families that choose to homeschool their kids, and a growing number of families that choose religious-based schools or independent schools in lieu of public schools. So when you combine all of those things, we saw a declining enrollment over time that was going to become significant in the out years. And we're talking about differences from the 8,000s down to the 7,000s where we're at now. There were plans that were in place to look towards how we handle that declining enrollment and how we ensure that the aging infrastructure that is our city schools is taken care of. Okay, the cornerstone of that approach at that time was a new elementary school and renovations to a couple of existing elementary schools. Somewhere in the 18-19 timeframe, the priorities within the city changed, and those plans were put on the back burner. They were shelved, okay? The importance of those plans were that when you build a new building in any part of the city, you would probably build a building that was larger than what you currently have. So you would be approaching a 500 to 600 student elementary school. When you bring in the declining enrollment with a new building, from my perspective, you always needed something to open the door for how you were going to change attendance zones. Were you going to close a school? Were you going to consolidate? It's what I refer to as a triggering event. Build a new school, it's larger, you get to fit more kids in it. Where do you bring those kids from? You look at the zones, you move folks around, okay? That was the plan, and the direction got changed. City Hall changed the priorities, and we moved in a different direction. Unfortunately, now it's 2025. Enrollment has declined to the 7,300 that I mentioned earlier, ADM sitting at 7,120.6, and we still have the same number of schools that are operating. So whether you're a proponent of consolidation, rezoning, new schools, maintaining the status quo, the problem is still the same. We've got aging infrastructure that needs some investment in it, and we need to provide quality schools for the children of the city. I want to take you through a small comparison of numbers then and now, and I'm using round numbers, and I'll stick with round numbers. And the round numbers, I'll caveat it to say, they are not exact numbers for the times I'm referencing. They are round numbers close, but they get to the point of what I want to make. So in 2014 and 2015, there was approximately $39 million provided by the city of Lynchburg towards the school's annual budget. Assuming we had 8,500 students in Lynchburg City Schools in that school year, and by student breakdown, that equates to $4,588. If you use a consumer price index inflator, and the one I used was the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the inflation over 10 years makes that 4,588 become 6,167. So we know that LCS has fewer students than it had 10 years ago. So using another round number, 7,500 students. If we use the $6,167 per student times 7,500 students, that equates to $46.2 million just based off of an inflation factor of what the city provided schools in 2014, 2015, compared to what, from an inflation factor, city should be providing schools in 2024 and 25. Unfortunately, Lynchburg City Schools is still only getting $39 million. So let me break down some of that over time. From 2014 to 2016, there was a partnership between the city and the schools to move the needle. A couple of components of that involved an instructional assistant in every kindergarten classroom, additional FTEs for things like movement ed teachers, tradesmen in the maintenance department to actually start a second shift to keep up with the recurring maintenance, bookkeepers for elementary schools. They had no bookkeepers before that, so 6 bookkeepers were brought on to service 11 elementary schools. Over that time frame, the budget increased by roughly $2.8 million. So city schools funding from the city increased to roughly the $42 million point. Now, 10 years later, we're back at $39 million. We still have instructional assistants in kindergarten classrooms. We still have second shift maintenance, or at least have the personnel that would make up second shift maintenance. We still need the movement ed teachers. We still need the bookkeepers. So that's a burden on the operations of schools. It's 2025. There's a new person in the White House. There's been a new governor for a couple of years. There are also some other significant influences that I want this combined body to be aware of. We do not at this point know what the impacts might be from any executive orders impacting grants that may come down from the federal government through the state government. There are some fairly sizable grants for economically disadvantaged students, for special education students, and then there are some other grants that have been attained over the past couple of years through good initiative of staff members to assist students with mental health issues and other challenges that we see in young people today. For those of you that were at the meeting that the Secretary of Education, when she came to town, she talked about the roughly $3.8 million that the city schools had received to support the various components of All-In and Virginia literacy. Those funds are in their second year of obligation. Their third year will be next year, and then those funds will no longer be. So we're looking very closely at how to effectively use those funds into year 3. The first 2 years are in effect spent and obligated. Last year, the school system went through a reduction in force that by my count removed 81 full-time equivalent positions from the workforce. At the same time, due to the loss of CARES Act funding, or the various CARES Acts that occurred, putting them all in one bucket, the school division also lost 39 what we call building level substitutes. So that's an employee that goes to a building every day to fill in for a classroom that needs them versus just bringing in a regular substitute teacher. There have been updates that have been done to Lynchburg City Schools. But within that, if you have constrained budgets and tightening budgets, a few things weren't kept up with. And you've got recurring costs in this building. We've got electricity, water, and gas. Over many points of a budget cycle, you should be inflating those to keep up with what AEP's charging, what the utilities are charging. Many of those instances of payments are behind a little bit. Likewise, recurring software maintenance agreements, things like that, are behind a little bit. Health insurance, one of those areas that's behind a little bit. So there are some components in the ask that are the health insurance component and a couple of $100,000 to get the utilities up to where they need to be. Other things that I provided in the packets for you is Dr. Day did an amazing job of pulling together a document that has hyperlinks all embedded in it relative to all of the different facilities, discussions, presentations, points and details. It's really a great one-stop shop. And I also provided this one-page snapshot of all of the budget requests we received. And on this document, 95% of the columns are grayed out because those are things that we did not request additional funding for. The components of our ask for an additional $5.5 million is first and foremost to fund the 3% pay raise for all employees. The state does not provide the 3% for all employees. They only provide for a percentage of them. We want to move towards a $17 an hour minimum wage. We're at 15, I think, right now. Getting us to 17 keeps us competitive in the marketplace. And by my numbers, I think we are the second largest employer in the city behind the healthcare system. $50,000 for starting teachers. Our employees rate a step increase, so a longevity pay raise every 2 years. That's in there. Health insurance premiums, other benefit-related increases. If I give somebody a 3% pay raise on their salary, there's also a burden that comes along with the benefits component. And we've also included 16 building-level substitutes. We noticed in the fall of this year that there just weren't enough substitute teachers, true substitutes. Somebody just picks up a job for a day and goes to Heritage Elementary. So we wanted to bring back at least a building level substitute that the principal can use at their discretion. Additionally, we've included a request for 10 bus aides. If you think about a driver of a bus with anywhere from 35 to 45 children behind them, the driver needs to focus on driving the bus. And in some instances, we need another adult in the bus space to deal with the children and to make sure that they're complying with rules so we keep everybody safe. Then there are the minor maintenance and operation increases that I think is $350,000 to $400,000. That's what's in the ask to the city to help the schools for this next budget cycle. I'll end with, I think everybody in this room knows that our school system is a key economic driver for the city. It's time for the school system to be seen as a partner in the success of the city and not critically marked down or looked at skeptically. Folks, if your school division fails, your city will ultimately fail. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Mr. Copeland. You have anything, Mr. Booth? No. Okay, the floor is now open for discussion. And we'll try to keep it short for time constraint. The city school got another meeting at 4 o'clock. Mr. Day?
I want to make a couple comments. I asked for this joint meeting because I think we, the school board and city council together, need to reach a mutual agreement and commitment on the support for our schools, both operating budgets and facilities plans for the years ahead. We've been trying to develop a facilities plan for years. Dr. Copeland outlined for you some of the planning that was attempted a decade ago or so. And as you know, in September of 2023, the school board adopted a plan to close T.C. Miller and Sandusky elementary schools and to add classrooms at Bass Elementary. But for this or any plan to move forward would have required city council support for the financial cost of the Bass expansion. But since it appeared to the board that council would not support it, and in response to pressure from the community, the board did an about-face, abandoning that plan and instead decided that it wanted to rebuild Sandusky Elementary. But we have not thought through whether a responsible overall plan can be developed around that idea, the idea of rebuilding Sandusky Elementary. I believe the core problem behind our vacillation and overall inaction is that our two bodies are not respecting each other's roles, but are trying to work independently. The school board cannot plan without some degree of confidence on what city council will support financially. And city council cannot make financial commitments to the schools apart from the detailed understanding of the school's operations that only the school administration and board can provide. There needs to be more mutual trust and respect for the distinct roles of our two bodies than we have seen in recent years. The school facilities are deteriorating, which means their maintenance needs are rising. Even a plan to consolidate will require new spending to reconfigure the remaining facilities to accommodate the increased load on them as they pick up students from discontinued schools. Some consolidation will be needed, but this will not relieve the city of the increasing costs of running its public schools. Over the last decade, our student enrollment, has been decreasing at roughly 1% each year, and I base that on historical ADMs, as reported by the state. But inflation easily outpaces that. New mandated programs increase per student costs, and the costs of coping with students' increasing mental health and behavior needs are also increasing. According to my calculations, the city's revenues have increased by 35% since 2015. But the amount allocated to the school's operating budget has increased by less than 1%. The city needs to face the fact that it has not kept up with the funding the schools need. Buildings are eroding, morale is low, and some of our most experienced and dedicated people are leaving. So again, I am asking that we find a way to reach agreement on a general plan for our schools for the next decade, which we are both committed to financially and operationally, and to start to climb out of the hole we are in rather than dig in deeper.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anyone else? Mr. Deemer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your comments, Dr. Day. I just want to start off by thanking all the folks who volunteer and work in our public school systems, employees and volunteers. But I want to mention the school board specifically because the school board is volunteer, is not paid. And that's a lot of time. And I respect the fact that you guys make that commitment to serve our students, to serve our kids, because that's why we're all here. I appreciate the comments of my colleagues, and even though I'm relatively new on city council and new to the issue and haven't even really voted on anything school related yet, I appreciate the previous council's commitment to teachers and increasing pay. I think that was an important step, and I appreciate what they did there. We do have some aging schools. I understand the average age is about 56 years on our buildings. That's an old infrastructure for sure. Yesterday, I visited Sandusky Elementary and Sandusky Middle School and saw exactly what is going on the direct level. And our students certainly deserve to be in safe and clean schools. And we're not keeping up with that in some ways. And I say that even though I haven't been on city council until recently. So I do want us to make it clear that we are committed to a public school system in Lynchburg. And coming from two parents who are educators, I understand the importance of education and the public contract that we have to educate and to provide even a free education to people. And I don't want us to forget for a moment that the real point of all of this is the kids. It's the students, okay? I've got 7 children. I understand the importance of education. I've homeschooled. I've started a classical Christian private school, and I've sent my kids to public school. And I've gone to public schools, and I've gone to private schools. I have served in the on the House Education and Senate Education committees in the General Assembly as a legislative aide for a member of those committees. So I kind of understand a little bit about some of these issues, even though Lynchburg issues are a little different. But I want us to not forget in these conversations another important group, and that's the taxpayers. The taxpayers have paid for all of this, all of it, and sometimes they're forgotten. In my campaign, I talk to a lot of taxpayers, and I don't want them to be left out of the communication. A lot of them, don't even have kids in public schools, never will, but they're committed to that contract that we have to provide a free education for the students in Lynchburg. But a lot of them are on fixed incomes, and they're asked continuously to give more and more. So I just don't want us to forget them in this conversation. I'm very happy, and I think the headline coming out of today is that the school board and city council are amenable to get together and talk. And I think that's huge. I think we need to do it on a regular basis, continuing forward. And I hope each one of us will continue to make that commitment, that we will continue to talk and continue to try to do what's best with the limited resources and the unlimited needs that are before us. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Letitia? Lowry?
Hello, everyone. Is this on? Okay. All right. There it goes. All right. My proposal is that I propose that a facility be found by the city in which we can house our alternative behavior education from K through 12 in one area of it, and more extreme behavior in a second part, and the GED and retention intensive education in another part of it for those who are less extreme in their behavior and are willing to learn. Alternative education students will be closer in proximity to the GED that is offered in the building if they're there in the building with the program. This can all be in one place with separate entrances if possible to help consolidate other facilities from being used and paying for utilities and other expenses that come with building usage. We need to have 5 more positions to fund increase and the SSO positions for this alternative site, middle and high school of Mr. Caputo's officers, as well as centralized office for campus safety. For education purposes, teachers who teach retention education can work together as their own team apart from the homeschool with pacing guides, the home school, the school of the kids came from, with pacing guides to meet students where they are. The idea is to have an area without the distractions of most challenging students interrupting education of the other students in alternative education. So when they return to their base school, they aren't further behind. The challenging students will still be educated, but due to behavior, the pace will be based due to their own noncompliance. It would also be helpful for the city council to advise for businesses not involved with the schools and the workforce programs to encourage them to invest in the workforce initiative going on now, so students will want to stay in the area and work and boost our community.
Dr. Wilder?
We appreciate the presentation. Just make sure I want to get some information. How much did we fund the school system for the city budget? How much was that last year? And how much of an increase are you requesting for this year for the budget itself?
Yes, please. Oh, friend. Yes.
There we go. Dr. Wilder, it was 39.4 was the local, and what they're requesting is 5.5.
So additional 5.5.
Yes, sir.
Correct.
Do I get that right?
All right.
All right.
Excellent, thank you. And also, as far as the school system is concerned, have you guys made a determination as far as what the plans are to renovate Sandusky Elementary or to build a new? I haven't heard the final. It's changed a little bit, so I'm trying to see what's the final plan, or is there one yet?
I guess my response to that, Dr. Wilder, is where does the city sit on funding for any of the options? It's hard to make a decision if we don't know where the funding is going to be.
And as far as those conversations to our city manager, where are those conversations? Are we having a separate discussion on that? Are we looking at a city team to see what we can afford financially? Again, I understand what the taxpayers are saying. I totally understand that. But we must understand we must fund our education. As far as having a strong public education system is so crucial for businesses coming into our city, to bring in new businesses, plus they're our children. That's our responsibility. And we have seen what happens when people close schools down or don't invest in their schools or keep pushing off systems. I mean, when I was on the school board, Sandusky Elementary was on the, to be renovated when I was on the school board 15 plus years ago, and it keeps being pushed along. Other things happen, it gets pushed along. So we've pushed that can down the road for so long. So we need to readdress that as a city. So what are the plans as far as the city's concerned, as far as debt capacity to assist our school systems and the capital piece? Now, there's one piece about the budget piece, but there's the capital piece for our school system construction. Where do we stand in that area?
So not dissimilar from, so the city is made up of 17 departments, and I call kith and kin, courts, Commonwealth's attorney, clerk of court, what have you, and also schools. And so each year, Ms. Donna Witt, our chief financial officer, go Wildcats. She's a little sad I went and saw Duke this weekend. They submit to us a request, and usually we give them budget instructions. The schools, not dissimilar, and they themselves worked hard, Ben and his team, to submit that. And so it was 5.5 in operating, and then by way of capital improvement plan, if I have this number right, it's 118.2 million, I believe. Do I have that at least within the ballpark, meatball? Yeah. And in that, Dr. Wilder, I do believe at least listed there was the rehabilitation of Sandusky at 30 million. So it's 118 million is the request. And then realize that later this evening, we are biannual assessments. You have maybe begun to see notices in your mailboxes in this evening. Jeff Bandy, who is our real estate assessor, make sure when you see that young man that you give him a hug, because he gets out there and does a good job. What you'll learn is where we are and what growth we've seen over the last year and what a penny is worth. And in the 3+ years that I've been here working for the city, what's great is that the city has seen pretty consistent growth, which is fantastic. And so that penny now, we'll get the averages and make sure that I'm on it, I think is worth $900,000. And what that means is that each penny you can use to borrow. That's your capital improvement plan. That's not your operating, your cash flow, the revenues necessary to meet expenses. It's what you borrow. And then what we have is what was called debt capacity, or our debt service annually is what we can afford. And so in that, one of the opportunities leading into this impending budget season. We'll talk to you about the capital improvement plan on February 25th. Ms. Donna Witt will engage you on that. And on the second Tuesday in March, I will propose the city's budget. And in there, I'm taking into account, because you remember you have different initiatives to include public safety, infrastructure, quality of life, lifelong learning, and under lifelong learning falls K through 12 education. So I heard Dr. Copeland, I'll say that in the formal, I heard Ben say, to the degree that the city is prepared to fund. I think in my first or second year, when I first arrived, there was earmarked $20+ million. Donna, keep me honest on this, for a Sandusky, or a new Sandusky, or something akin to it. There was back and forth as to whether or not that was the path to be taken by that council, by this board, by these boards. So then I subsequently changed that to a school maintenance and infrastructure, and became, and I'll use these words because I went to seminary in between undergraduate and law school, agnostic as to what it meant, right? Because your plan is your plan. You know how and where things need to be financed, or at least improved. And so over that time, and then last year, candidly, we couldn't afford our capital improvement plan. It was a maintenance capital improvement plan. So going back to that debt service and the capacity to borrow, it was limited. And so Donna and her team worked together to kind of really pay for and borrow for what we could afford. And there was a limited amount. And so positioned ahead of you for this coming year is, to the degree and what level, I think I'm going to call it this, and I can't believe I'm saying that here, the Heritage High School was brought up. And if with anything, you know, debt is 20 year that has to be accomplished. And Donna calls it, when we go to the rating agency, it's called the pig and the snake. I'm sorry for the image. But over the 20 years, it takes that time to be able to expend or pay down the money that we've borrowed to build said certain asset. So it's not dissimilar from anything else that's also in the capital improvement plan. So at 118 million, it's quite a bit, right? Not to say that the infrastructure, I think Ben described it as aged. I think the average age is 63 years. I think it comes back to what Vice Mayor Deemer said. We have finite resources and infinite number of elements that we can invest in. So Dr. Wilder, I think it would be to you and your peers about what I intend to propose, because I do think the infrastructure is aged and there's investment that should be made. I will propose one in the capital improvement plan, and then I'll look for direction between these bodies. And I think particularly as to what the schools thinks is probably the best path forward.
Thank you.
Dr. Copeland.
Go ahead. Go ahead first. I'll take.
Ms. Reed?
No. Is this thing on? It is. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Copeland, for your presentation. I appreciate the information. A couple things I'd like to touch on. One is we've seen our governor, I think for 2 years in a row, prioritize education. This year especially, put a major emphasis across our state on education, making historic investments. And while we've seen him do that, unfortunately, I would selfishly love all that money to come to Lynchburg. He has to share it amongst the Commonwealth, so we don't see quite as much of it come to us that we'd like to, but he has made it known education is his priority, and it needs to be ours. It needs to be ours. And I recall campaigning with several people on our council saying that public safety, education, and the economy were our priorities. We've delivered on a historic public safety package in a previous budget. We did a historic tax cut for those who wanted that. But I'm still waiting for us to deliver on a historic investment in our education system. When are we going to do that? When are we going to do that? We talk about delivering on our campaign promises. I'm reminded of it all the time. And we haven't delivered on the third one. And our governor has shown that across the Commonwealth, it's his priority. He's done it 2 budgets in a row. It's time. I went to the Secretary of Education myself and asked her for $154 million. She didn't give it to me, but I tried. I did. 100 million of that was for the needs of our schools, was just for the condition of our schools, not for gold line hallways. It was for the building infrastructure. It was for the roofs. It was for the HVAC systems. It was because our buildings are not in good shape. I advocated for us, for both of our boards, because our children deserve, and the teachers, and the custodians, everyone in those buildings deserve a healthy learning and teaching environment, first and foremost, to start and end their day. $100 million is what is needed just for that. First, that's that money. We look at the inflated cost that Dr. Copeland showed that they deserve. We talk about our taxpayers. Every number that we look on charts, it's a child with a name. They are future taxpayers, let's remember. We are all investing in them. And we all, whether we have children in these schools or not, deserve a good return on our investment. We do. Whether we're on fixed incomes, big incomes, little incomes, these little people deserve a great education. We should be doing everything we can to give that to them. For the ones who will have no option but public education, and to the ones whose parents say, I want my money's worth. I shouldn't have to homeschool or private school them. I want them to go to the public school because it should be the best that my money should buy as a taxpayer. And they should have good quality school buildings, and they should have great teachers because my taxpayer dollars should go to that. That's what we should be investing in. And from the city council side and the city side, we're the landlords. We have a program right now that makes sure we don't have slumlords in the city. We should be doing the same thing with the buildings that we run and operate for these children, for our city children, for our students. I understand that we're going to have to come together and figure out how to manage the budget that our city manager has put together. I trust him. I trust us to do the right thing. But it is time to deliver on the campaign promise that we made in education. Period.
All right, Mayor, thank you, and apologize if I offend anybody. And I'm not speaking as a school board chair. I'm going to speak as a taxpayer and a citizen.
Yes, sir.
It breaks my heart every time I hear we got to do something for schools, and then those are empty words. Last year, city has $15 million of extra funds. 15. How much did the school system get? Zero. It didn't even get 4 stickies from city council to be on the list. You talk about schools are important. You were all there in that meeting. I was in Diamond Hill Baptist Church. City was fighting for $23 a minimum wage for employees working in the 911 communication center. I'm correct? I'm just putting you on spot, but that's the number. And our drivers are getting $15 an hour. Have we done anything wrong? We work same 40 hours a week. We go to the same program you guys go to. There's nothing different there. Why there's a differential? The deferred maintenance has been there for years. it has come to a point, Dr. Vodka is here, we may have to close the EC glass track field because if you don't fix it, it's not good for kids to play in fall. Am I correct, Dr. Vodka? So I'm not trying to create a panic here. What I'm saying is talk is cheap. $42 million was the city hall match when I came on the school board. As per city manager is 39.4. The cost of doing business has gone up, but our contribution has gone down. Every time I hear an excuse, guess what? The state is pumping in more money. Yes, but what they do is they do it for very focused, like all in VA sounds fancy, but it goes for after school program. Not every teacher is teaching in after school program. 85% of our budget is in human resource. Human resource. You and I, we have bills to pay. They expect a certain increase in their salaries. And most of the funding which comes goes into those salary payments. So my point is, we can build a fancy police station. That's perfectly fine. But school systems are equally important. And they have been left out. Talk is cheap. Time for action was yesterday. Hopefully it's today. You know, you can put shackles on the school system by saying you're not going to spend money beyond here, only on this one. But put shackles on everybody else. You said you got 17 departments, right? Why to put shackles on one and leave the 16 out? If you do, shame on you, because you're putting it on people who are powerless. City's population is 26% black and brown. School system has 72% black and brown kids. Rich kids who wanted to leave school system have left school system long time ago. They have. So it should not be the school of last resort for anybody, no human being. Behavior problems have gone up. The number of students in IEP is 1,000. Dr. Copeland, 1,000, that has been the number for last 10 years. I hope you come to the school system and stay with me for the whole 8 hours. Don't come for a window show and leave. Then you'll see what the teachers encounter day in, day out. The kids are big. They come many times morning in the elementary school, hide up because secondary hand smoke, which you and I were there in the bill, failed in the house side last time. You have to keep them in separate rooms. I can go on and on. Daily operational problems which have popped up as part of our culture. Societal issues. We are not a social reform institution, but we got to deal with them firsthand. So please keep that in mind as you make these decisions. The time has passed to talk that I need to help the school system. We are not looking for a handout. We're looking for a shared contribution for a growing community. And that should be the motto. My tax this year, Mr. Deemer, has gone up twice. I used to pay $1,100 in my property taxes. Now I'm paying $22 to $24. You can check the city records. Twice. Same house. I don't live in a big mansion. I live in a small home. You all know where I live. My tax, and I don't mind paying more tax. But you understand what I'm saying? So how many of my fellow city people are paying same thing? And I don't have a choice to pay you less money. Otherwise, you'll get a lien on my house. My point is, the more tax money is being carved out by me, that's why I'm speaking as a taxpayer. But where is that money going? Is that money going into the extra funding? But schools didn't get a dime of it last year. I apologize for any inflamed speeches I made, but I wanted to get it out there, those numbers. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We have time for one more. Mr. Mission.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, Vice Mayor. First thing I've got to do is my disclosure that my wife is a teacher in the Lynchburg City School System, and I'm able to weigh in on this objectively and partially, and I'm a part of a group which would be spouses of Lynchburg City Schools teachers. And I also have 2 children in Lynchburg City Schools, one in Bedford Hills and one in R.S. Payne. My 2 older boys are in Bedford County Public Schools. And I'm glad they were, because there was a decision that was made in 2019 to close the schools during the pandemic, which I believe had a detrimental impact. We were provided a memo from city staff that showed the enrollment changes and projections for public schools and private schools, estimated kindergarten to 12th grade. And it's pretty obvious to see what happened. When there was a decision for Lynchburg City Schools to close, there was a spike in private school enrollment. And we always need to remember that decision that was made, because that has a lot to do with why we are where we are today. Because enrollment in the school system has gone down since then.
Point of clarity, I believe that the governor of the Commonwealth
Closed all schools in March of 2020.
My children in Bedford County schools continued going to school in person, full-time.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify for the group that it was a governor's order to close schools
It was
in March
it was a
of 2020.
local order to essentially close Lynchburg City Schools to in-person learning. And I remember Councilmember Feraldi was one of the most vocal critics against closing schools back then. But there's a lot to consider here. You know, we've got to look at things as council members, as citizens, as taxpayers, as parents, as spouses, all of the above. Everything goes into this. I look at people's electric bills going through the roof right now. My electric bill on average right now is up about $150 a month over what it was last year. My energy use is down. Okay. When we're talking about an equalization rate with a real estate tax of 77 to 78 cents is what was told to us, and staying at 89 cents, that's a 16% real estate tax increase on our entire city. And it's going to hit homes harder because that's where the demand is. It's going to hit single family homes harder, just like it hit last time. We talk about the tax cut that happened 2 years ago. I still pay more in real estate taxes after that tax cut. So it's disproportionate in how it impacts commercial versus residential properties, because there's a lot of vacancy in commercial properties. There's not a lot of vacancy in the residential home market. We have to consider all those factors. People are strapped right now. But our schools also need some support. When we look in the past in history, I think it was 2003 was the last time we consolidated any schools. Kaiser Elementary, is that right? Kaiser Elementary in 2003 is the last time. So it's been 22 years since we permanently closed a Lynchburg City School building. I know that's a tough decision to make, but when I look at the MGT projections for where we were supposed to be in the current year, this is what was provided us 2 years ago. 2 years ago, what'd you say the enrollment was right now, Mr. Superintendent?
K through 12, 7,300.
So the MGT projection for the current year, which is what all those scenarios were based off of, is 7,821. So 500 kids. That's the enrollment in another elementary school, right? So we have to look at the numbers, the real raw numbers of what's happening here. It's just math. It is what it is. We cannot continue to have these inefficiencies in our school division. You know, that disparity is something to look at. Something else to look at too, the consultant projections we were looking at. I was able to find in an old annual comprehensive financial report the capacity numbers for our school buildings. And some of these buildings have had the portable classrooms added to them since then. So I backed out Sandusky Middle and Heritage High from both sides. And the functional capacity for the buildings that are like for like that we currently have by MGT was 7,646 from the consulting firm. Yet old city records show that those same existing buildings had an optimum capacity of 8,491 or a maximum capacity of 9,925. That's a question I've been asking. I'd still love to have an answer for. Where's the change coming from that we go from 10,000 student capacity in these buildings down to a consulting firm that says it's 7,700, round numbers, as you mentioned earlier. Something else to mention. Vice Chair, Mr. Day, the other Marty. You had mentioned, can you go over that statistic you provided about the change in funding for schools versus inflation? The 2015 number to the,
Yeah. Yeah, I looked up, so are you referring to the city's allocations to the school's budget?
what you said in your remarks about the
35% increase in city funding? Is that what you're referring to?
I think so, and there was
Yeah,
almost no increase.
I looked those up from all the city's annual financial reports, their contributions to the city's budget back to 2014. And so I calculated the increase in city revenue between 2015. In 2015, it was 168.5 million. In 2025, it was 227.6 million.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just calculated, what percentage increase is that?
And then the schools,
And then the school, the amount that the city contributed to the school's budget. School's budget is partly from the city, partly from the state, and partly from federal. So I looked at the amount that the city had contributed to the state budget, and I calculated a percentage increase of less than 1% over the same 10-year period.
got it.
I
So-
can give you the exact numbers if you want them.
That's okay. I got some numbers right here. I'm looking at Table 7 of our most recent annual comprehensive financial report that was received at the end of the year last year. In 2015, the total revenues for Lynchburg City Schools was $86.3 million. In 2024, it was $111 million. That's a pretty,
What
the
number is
total
that?
revenues went from,
Total revenue.
this is the audit numbers, the actual numbers. Total revenues for the city, Lynchburg City Schools, were $86.3 million. It's Table 7, page 174 in the FY 2024 Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. Total revenues for Lynchburg City Schools in 2015 were $86.3 million. Total revenues for Lynchburg City Schools in 2024 were $111 million. So, and I understand that there are some constraints, but it's not $26 million worth of constraints, I don't believe, with the increase in intergovernmental.
Within that number, you're failing to state that the city's contribution did not change. So you're talking about additional revenues that came in from the state or other resources, but there were no additional resources provided by the city.
Sure. And the question that I have, and I hope somebody's got a pen because I would love to have the answer to this question, is how has the local ability to pay in the composite index changed in that same time period? Because when the state is kicking in more money, it often is because we are at a more fiscally stressed point, right? The ability for us to extract those taxes and that revenue out of the citizens is higher, or they're lower, excuse me. The fiscal stress report for the city shows that we have high fiscal stress. So considering all these things, I want to point to something that we all saw on the way in here today. It was a sign at 3550 Young Police. Do you know what the sign says? City of Lynchburg Information Technology Center. Lynchburg City Schools Information Technology Center. We could not be in a better place, a better building for this meeting. And I don't think we should ever have a joint meeting in the LRBA with this body because both bodies use this building. But there's one problem. They're two totally different IT departments. 2 years ago, when I got sworn in, one of the first things that I discussed with the city manager is we need to start consolidating some departments between Lynchburg City Schools and the city of Lynchburg. Why do we have two completely different IT department heads, two completely different IT departments in the same building, when we could probably consolidate that IT department between both the school division and the city municipal government and save money. There's actually several departments that we could look at if we think about it. And those departments that we could look at, and I know that there's a lot of pushback from this, and I've heard it, but finance is one of them. Lynchburg City Schools doesn't have their own procurement department. We do procurement for Lynchburg City Schools as the city government. Why aren't we looking at consolidating the finance departments? It's a natural fit, right? Same thing, human resources. Why aren't we looking at that? Why do we have two different human resources departments? Why don't we look at consolidating those? Fleet. We've got a bus shop up here. We got a fleet department over off of 5th Street. Why aren't we looking at consolidating fleet between both sides? And finally, probably the one that is the most natural fit is the facilities and the buildings and grounds, because the city owns the buildings. Why aren't we looking at, and what would the cost savings be? I just round numbers off of my head. If you're looking at salary and benefits for a department head at $150,000 and you consolidated those under 5 department heads, that's $750,000, $750,000 right there. Almost a penny, Mr. Manager. And that is what we need to be looking at, because the more efficient we operate our school division and the better choices we make. I campaigned on smarter spending. That's smarter spending. Okay? That is a great way to take a look at it. It puts our citizens first. It puts our students first. It puts the city first, because we don't need waste in the system. Every dollar of waste is a dollar we can't put towards a child, period. And I just think we can do better. And in closing, one thing I'm looking forward to seeing in the capital improvement program, I know that there's been a lot of discussion that has flown around about this, but there's a public works project, not water resources. It doesn't have anything to do with water pipes. In the capital improvement program right now, it's about $53 or $56 million for downtown streetscaping. Streetscaping is urban landscape architecture, essentially. Park benches, trash cans, the little copper roofed transit stop things, pavers, all kinds of different stuff, right? It's being done in conjunction with another water resources project to replace some pipes. We got to replace the pipes. We're in there doing that. But $56 million, the last, and this is something interesting that I found, and I didn't even know that this statistic was in there, shows that we're spending $2 million a city block on downtown beautification and streetscaping, right? Downtown streetscaping is $2 million a city block. Now, I don't know about you, but I would rather invest that money into maintaining our school buildings and fixing our school buildings than I would on something that's nice. We need to fix our school buildings. And it's not just our school buildings. Captain Andrews can tell you the same thing. There's fire stations that are falling apart. Go down to Station 1, look at the cracks in the columns holding it up. Go over to Station 8, look at how the cinder block's hanging off the front of the building. Can you still see daylight through that? But there's a wall in the front bedroom that when I worked at the fire department for years, you could see daylight through the front of it. But we're spending money on wrought iron park benches, trash can receptacles, these little copper roofed transit things, slates, pavers, brick, whatever, at $2 million a city block. I think it's pretty simple. I think our priorities are out of line. I think we need to look at moving that downtown beautification funding into maintaining our schools. And I do think we need to just take a hard look at what it's going to mean. And I know it's a tough decision to make, to consolidate in Lynchburg City Schools, because if we shrink that footprint, it's going to be more manageable. We're going to be able to focus those dollars where they belong, to the kids. to making sure we have academic outcomes. That's what matters. That's what matters. The most important thing is those academic outcomes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Ferrari?
Sir, I'll wait for the microphone. I think one of the ways the city could certainly save some funds is to stop fighting ridiculous lawsuits in the court system. Mr. Mayor, I appreciate this meeting for a number of reasons. We've got a lot to do, and I don't want us to get into quote unquote the weeds, because we need to come up with objectives and a vision that we can buy into. And then we can we as both bodies, then we as a collective school board and council can come up with ways to meet those objectives. That's been the failure, and I look to our school board chair, that's been the failure. And if I could tie a year to it, what sounds like since 2017, when there was a change from City Hall, as it was mentioned, on the plan to really fund the infrastructure. Do I have that generally speaking?
Yeah, I think it's 18, 19.
Okay. Here's what if I could put a bow on what we need today, we need a school funding formula. So our city council and the manager knows ahead of time how much more, based off of metrics that could be defined by us, here's how much more or less the school division could receive. Now I say less because if the economy is dictating where the tax revenues are, we need to at least be open to that. Odds are, year over year, the last 20 years, there's maybe been 2 instances where that might have happened. And I'm thinking of the 08 crisis and so on and so forth. We need to be open to creating that formula. Second, we need a group of us who are willing to meet on a regular basis and review numbers, plans, funding streams, what's city council saying, what's school board saying, and so forth. That way, that open communication that Dr. Gupta passionately spoke about can be had. Because we can't get all 35 of us together to go over this on a realistically a consistent basis. Should it happen twice a year? At a minimum. But that's why we, Stephanie Reed and I, really pushed for this joint committee of the school board and council to meet on a consistent basis to start bridging these conversations and saying, hey, here's where we're thinking about Sandusky or just another elementary school. We need city to make a decision on funding. Got it. Now 3 members of council, 3 members of the school board are having these conversations. Hey, we really want $50,000 to be the starting point for our teacher. Here's why, here's the numbers. Now, 3 members of council and 3 members of the school board can take that back to the rest. And even the public can watch. Those kinds of things can happen. We passed that. And I would challenge our leadership right now of council to appoint the leadership of that committee so they can get to work. And the very first thing they should consider, if it isn't the infrastructure plan, it's a school funding formula to lay the groundwork. It won't be able to be adopted this year, but it should be for the future. For the next budget, there's no reason that couldn't be started right now. Thirdly, that committee could get to work, yes, on the infrastructure needs of our city. It's interesting to me that when we talk about school closures, and I mean this without casting stones, it's just a very matter of fact. I'm trying to look at the future. The original plan was not to close Sandusky. That's why the Sandusky folks in my district reacted so strongly. It's because it wasn't the plan at first. That being said, we can now have a group who is really digging into the how and the why and what's the impact about these topics, about what a division-wide compensation realignment package would look like. And while respectfully, I wasn't able to follow Marty's presentation, there were a lot of nuggets in there that I myself would like to understand more. Those kind of things can happen at this committee. And then, of course, the tax component. I have a lot of reservations about the tax rates this year and where it's going to be proposed or what direction it goes. But here's one thing that I did hear that this group and the entire city can get behind. For those living on a fixed income, right now, this is a terrible time. If there's anything we can do, and I'll look to our manager with this, if there's anything we can do in the form of tax relief, in this proposal you're going to be giving to us that is related to those who are on a fixed income, that are retirees who are not working anymore and not seeing more dollars come their way. Look, I'm working. If that means I have to work 2 more hours a day, then I'm going to do what it takes for my family. Not everyone can do that. That's a form of tax relief that we must figure out. Those are the things I've taken away. I want to focus on solutions and trying to bring up ideas. We've got to get this committee going because it'll open up more trust and communication. And hopefully from that, school funding formula and a plan for infrastructure for the future. I think that's how we get there, guys. But right now, we need to identify what are today's objectives. To me, we need to come up with a vision or a framework of how to get to better X, Y, and Z. Right now, it takes a number of us to get together consistently and start sussing through these proposals and taking it back to us. That's what I would propose and what I would encourage. As far as your numbers, Mr. Superintendent, I got to tell you, the succinctness in which you presented this, I have been itching for through my 5 years doing this. Incredibly helpful. The background on, of course, I abbreviated it, LCI component,
Composite index.
thank you. Property value adjusted gross income. I mean, my notes here are very detailed because this is the information I've been looking for. And so I want to commend you and your staff and the school board for positioning it the way you did. Now it's on us to figure out how to make it happen. This isn't a Republican or Democrat thing. This is a Lynchburg thing. If you're touring these schools, you're seeing it. Lynchburg education should be LCS. It should be. Every parent should be choosing it. They're not going to do that right now unless we can get this and get it going. Fixed income, joint committee, school funding formula, infrastructure plan. Thank you.
Dr. Dick?
So, a little bit ago, Councilmember Wilder asked about what are the plans for one thing or another, and as soon as you said that, my response was, we don't really have a plan. What we've been doing is 1 year at a time, we struggle and wrestle with what we're going to do for the next fiscal year, and who knows what will happen the year after that. And so what I've heard expressed here, Mr. Ferraldi's expressed it, I think Vice Mayor Deemer has expressed the need for some kind of combined group with representatives from our two bodies to get together on a regular basis and do some planning and in a way that both bodies are involved in the planning, that we can get both bodies to buy into it, and in a way that we can be committed to the plan we come up with for more than 12 months at a time. You can't plan long-term 12 months at a time. It takes more than that to build a new school. You could appropriate funds right now to do the study for a new school, but it won't be this year's budget that builds it. It'll be the year after that and the year after that and probably the year after that too. You can't do long-term planning 1 year at a time. So I'm agreeing with what Mr. Ferraldi just said. I'm agreeing with, I think, what I heard Vice Mayor Deemer express, that we need a joint group to do long-term planning with the members from each side going back to their respective boards and keeping them informed so that those who are working together have the support of the whole group that's behind them, so that we can come up with a plan that will get us through more than 1 year at a time. I think that if we can come out of this meeting with an agreement to do that, then I think we will have accomplished something today.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Frawley, I appreciate, I think we need something for short term and other for long term. Short term, fiercely behind the scenes, I've been working on funding formula, but I've not gone very far on that. Dr. Copeland will say, he tells me every Friday, having a funding formula is good because it tells him in October how to design his budget, right, Dr. Copeland? That's what you've been telling me and Dr. Day in the years every day, is that he knows in October how to plan. It doesn't have to be in March and April. So it helps. So I thought maybe in short term, right now, short term, the needs are what should be, how our infrastructure money should be used, right? And maybe we can help city manager to import all that Norfolk funding formula into into Lynchburg. I propose that we make the school board policy allows chair to do an ad hoc committee, Dr. Day. I was asking, he's my parliamentarian. So we can do a two-member school board and two-member city council committee. Give them a charge, maybe come back as a joint group again in middle of April or so. And so it should not take months and years to complete this task. This is important, this is urgent, it needs to be done. So we shouldn't be sitting on it for months and months and months. So Mr. Mayor, I propose that we do 2 + 2. We provide 2 members, and I can make them public to you right now. And then you do 2 city council people and let them get to work tonight. And bring it back with your blessings. What day in April will work? We come back here to the public and make those presentations public. No behind the scenes. Let's make that information public and let them listen and have a participation from our stakeholders. That's my proposal, Mr. Mayor.
Can city council agree with this? Yes.
I may, that is in concept what the committee that we actually formally adopted. I would only submit to the public and everyone here, it was intentionally designed with 3 of each, intentionally, so that even if the body met, that committee met, it would constitute a public meeting and the public could have access. So I hear you. There are negotiational benefits, if that's even a word. There are benefits to negotiation by not having a public meeting. I'll be totally candid. However, in this, I would submit, I think it is best if we did honor the original intent of what council did pass, which is a 3 and a 3 for both. Obviously, the way it's been was originally designed, it does not have the authority to execute any action, to adopt any policies. It can recommend to both. So they're not going to be able to act independently of the full bodies. So my own 2 cents.
I'm fine with 3, just it should not bog it down to, the bureaucracy of the number of volume of people.
Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Chair. I appreciate what you guys put together, and I think if I heard you correctly say that there's a need for a short-term body and then also the long-term body, as I understood that. And as a parent, I get it, and I understand why. And it's because you need something that can be nimble, that can make a recommendation quickly. Because if there are going to be schools closed and consolidations that occur, we are barreling down on making that decision. And that's a decision that would have to be made relatively quickly and a recommendation that would have to be made quickly. And I think that I get it. I understand it. And I appreciate, and my only request would be that if you go with the 2 and 2, which I understand because you don't have to do the notice and the minutes and all of that stuff, it's more nimble that way, that those meetings would still be very, very, very open, very, very open and accessible to the public. And I can support it that way.
clarify one thing. I did a New Year resolution that I'll stay away from negativity in 2025. So school closure is not the objective this group will start with. The objective is how to best use the infrastructure money we are allocated by the city for the good of our kids. Is that fair statement?
Fair statement. And I also say consolidation because I heard the mention was made about a building for
So-
restorative or behavioral. What was that proposal you made?
It was for the city to find a building for the restorative.
And that could include rezoning and consolidation and those things, and it would be nice to be able to get that
I
information
just don't
prepared
want
as quickly as possible.
I don't want people to be scared and fearful of this thing. This is something which will be good for this city, good for the kids, and it will help the community grow
Absolutely.
and flourish in the years to come. You and I will retire pretty soon. No, you will not retire. I'll retire pretty soon, right? Then we move to Germany after that. But I still propose, with all due respect, Councilman, for all the 2+2 for now. And then, as once this task is done, we move over to 3+3, whatever the recommendation was. Because this needs to move in a month and a half. All the regulations in terms of you need to have 2-week notice, 1-week notice for a meeting will end.
Two by two.
2 by 2. And I can suggest 2 names if you allow me to do this.
Do so, sir.
So I propose Mrs. Lowry and Dr. Day to be the school board representatives.
Okay. And I recommend Chris Ferrati and Ms. Reed. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I know it's only my second year on the school board, but my concern is just doing finances in my own head for my own household. And I know money was found last year for Sandusky to keep it open this year. And so in my head, I'm thinking, where's it coming for the next year and how do we keep the lights on? So this is something I guess have a question on that's just been bugging me all year long as the year's been going on. I'm like, what are we going to do at the end of June? So, yeah.
So I'll provide a level of clarity.
And then look towards my support team if I get something wrong. There were discussions of providing extra funding, but I believe that we remained at the 39.4 million because additional monies came in from other revenue sources. So there was no increase to the city's contribution to schools for this year, although there was talk of it at one point. But did I get that right? I got several head nods.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Joint.
Those monies came from the states. We had moved money to continue to keep the schools open last year, but the governor saw fit to give us some money. So we didn't have to use city money.
So what happens after June?
Nothing. It was in a contingency reserve. What city allowed us was to be able to dip into contingency reserve if the need arises.
Yes.
But the need never arose, so it stayed in that savings account and never moved to a checking account. So
Yes.
the money has stayed into the savings account, and
Yes.
these guys may just may take it as a CD of that money, but we have not used that money.
Thank you.
So the understanding is this joint report will come to the public and to the joint
Yes.
body
Yes.
sometime in April, middle of April? Is that, Dr. Copeland?
And just for a point of clarity, you're looking for city staff to come forward with a recommendation that this body can then review, and
Yeah.
then,
I think this group of 4 will work closely with you and the city manager,
Yes.
got it.
right? That's the objective, to work, all of us work as a team. If you need to talk to the parents, you should be able to do that, right? If you need to talk to any staff member, they should be able to do that. It's an open-ended communication. That's how we plan to do. But we should not bog down in the bureaucracy that, guess what? April has come in and we don't have anything to do. So,
Any more discussion? Let him speak, please.
There's a motion, privileged motion on the floor that has to be voted on. Motion to adjourn.
And we have a vote to adjourn.
Hold on. The mayor-
A second.
It sounds like the mayor pulled the motion out of order to allow members to speak. So certainly, Mayor, I think that's within your ability to do so if you're conducting a meeting. Certainly you could also entertain the motion to adjourn.
Point of order. It's my understanding that the motion to adjourn is a privileged motion. It supersedes everything, and that it's not within the prerogative of the chairman to overrule a privileged motion. Is that not correct?
I understand, Mayor, whoever's presiding officer can rule any motion in and out of order, particularly if there is someone who's trying to recognize.
I'll withdraw the vote.
FJ?
Thank you. I think I was going to say, I'm glad that we're making some progress into having something concrete come out of this meeting. Otherwise, I would think we need the meeting to be quarterly, and now that you're having this special little group, I think that's a movement forward in what we're trying to accomplish. And then we're going to basically conclude by making sure that we have this ask, and it's a positive thing, to get what we need for the school system, and that it's not, we want to make it clear that it's not a bare bones ask. So if there's that perception, then we'd like that to be squashed and make sure that we want to be satisfied. We don't want to be the family of 8 where the kid at the end only gets the one fry and everyone has a big hot box of fries, and they give the little kid, we're like the kid, the 9 kids that get a family of 9 that gets one little fry. We want to make sure we're satisfied and we have everything we need for the teachers and the students and the administration, right? So we definitely don't want to be left behind any longer.
Thank you. With that, thank everybody for coming out. Thank you. And hopefully, city council and city schools can move together in a collaborative effort to take care of our children.
Motion to adjourn.
Adjourn.